Hello, Smart Money Tree podcast listeners. Welcome to this week's show. My name is Kirk Chisholm. I'll be your host. And today I'm joined with Frances Reaves. How you doing today, Frances?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Kirk. How are you?
Doing great. Doing great. Glad to have you in the show. For those of the listeners who don't know Frances, maybe you can tell us a bit about your background.
Well, I am a what we call an elder law attorney. I do estate and Medicaid planning. Uh, I recently wrote a book, Boomers Booming: How to Thrive After 65 and Have Good Sex. And the reason for that book was really partly motivational. In other words, you got to go out, have a good time. This is it. This is the last quarter. And you've got to plan your life prior to going out and having a good time because that then allows you to go out and have a good time. And the reason I wrote that book is because I took my parents through their last 3 years of life, and I had no idea what how hard it is, how hard it is to get anybody's attention. So, because I'm an elder law attorney, I went ahead and created a company within my law firm, a DBA, doing business as, called Parent Your Parents. And we aim to be sort of a one-stop shop. And believe it or not, I have helped people from Texas, from California. Being an elder doesn't make it easier if you're from one state or the other. So that's sort of how you got me here today, Kirk.
So let's talk about elder care. So, as you would define elder care, what would fall into that definition?
Well, elder care, for the most part, is anyone over 60 to 65. I mean, 65 is when we get Social Security if we want, and as a right, Medicare um, becomes our insurer of choice at 65. So I think your elder care defines folks over 65. In today's world, I don't really believe, I mean, my experience over these past 8 or 9 years has been that you don't really have, I mean, you, most people don't really get sick or elderly 85-ish has sort of been my experience. But, and there are plenty of people who are 95-ish and doing very well.
Yeah, I mean, certainly we have a health crisis in this country for, getting there, but I think certainly people who are getting up to that age tend to be healthier. What do you see as some of the biggest challenges in dealing with elder care? Like what are kind of the big sticking points that you've seen?
Well, the fact that no one cares.
I set myself up for that one.
I mean, it is amazing to me. You catch me today having my husband has Alzheimer's. He's been in rehab. And now he's been moved over to the nursing home. He's what we call Medicaid pending. In other words, we've let the nursing home know we're applying for Medicaid. But he has now moved within this one facility one, two, three, 4 times. And the first 3 times we're in the same building. And I am now down 3 telephone chargers, and they moved him without letting me know from one building to the other, and there are no clothes. They forgot to move his clothes. I mean, what does that tell you? You know what I'm saying? I mean, and this is a really well-respected facility. So basically, what I'm saying now is that it doesn't, I mean, the best facility, and I have 6 or 7 clients at this facility. The best facility out there is only going to be okay. That's what I've learned.
So how do people so what are the best strategies? So let's say you have enough. So, and I don't know. I mean, when people get like, at what point are people forced into a facility, and can this just be done at home, and would that be better? Because you still have people dealing with people. So, If money was no object, like what would be the best care people could get?
If money were no object, the best care people would get is in-home care, which runs around $12,000 a month in-home care. It can go up to about 15 if you're working on time, et cetera, et cetera. Um, I think that a lot of people do it half and half. You know, they they have someone come in 3 or 4 times a week. Some people, if you're alone, I had several clients who were all by themselves, and when they ran out of money, they took a reverse mortgage on their home. So, I mean, a lot of people have long-term care. It gets more and more expensive. Long-term care insurance will take care of assisted living, in-home care. It all depends on the policy. I do think, even though it's more expensive now, it's worthwhile because even though it's going to cost you eight to $10,000 a year, we're looking at $12,000 a month for in-home care. So, and the other issue you hear about long-term care is, well, what if I don't use it? Well, it's a little like car insurance. You'd much rather not be in an accident, but you need the car insurance anyway.
Well, it's interesting, long-term care. It's kind of one of those fields that most people don't know much about, and it's confusing and it's hard to navigate. I know in Massachusetts, many insurance companies have actually left the state because it no longer made sense. I don't know how many are in the state now, but they've just decided it's uneconomical for them to provide long-term care in Massachusetts. So, how should people be thinking about long-term care? Because at one point, the way I saw the numbers, it was if you fit in this narrow sliver of people, then it makes sense. If you have too much money, it doesn't. If you have too little, it doesn't. So there's like this narrow sliver that makes sense. How do you look at long-term care as a solution for people in this field?
I don't think it's a narrow sliver. If if your assets are worth, if you have about $1 million, period, that's all you have, and you don't have long-term care, chances are excellent that you'll end up in Medicaid because all you have to do is get really sick and need in-home care and not be able to afford it, which means that then, you might be able to go into an assisted living center for a certain amount of time. But in the end, assisted living centers are anywhere, depending on where, but anywhere from three to $8,000 a month. So $1 million doesn't take you very far if you're very sick. For instance, my husband, I had him evaluated for assisted living. The only way assisted living would let him live there is if he had an 8-hour aide. And at $30 an hour, that's $240 a day. So the long-term care policies that I assist my clients with are normally the ones that you pay per day. In other words, assisted living centers and memory care units. And a memory care unit is just a paid nursing home. Uh, Less people, a little bit more vibrancy to them. But those are anywhere from $6,000 to $8,000 a month. And long-term care will pay for it. And there might be a little overage that you might end up. But if if you're worth $10 million, I don't think you need long-term care. If you're worth $5 million, you're kind of on the cusp, you know. It depends on the age, et cetera, et cetera. The issue is, are you going to get sick? For instance, my father lived to 94, mom lived to 88. So there's a very good chance I will live to my mid 90s. barring an accident, right? Um, so if I get sick, I'm all by myself. Who's going to take care of me? And if I have $1 million, it'll last me so long, but then I'm into a Medicaid situation because I can't afford the long-term care anymore.
So, so let me ask. So you mentioned the issues when you get sick. Well, presumably everybody gets sick at some point, right?
Right,
And
right,
there's always the one thing that really gets people in is the accident, right? The fall and never really recover.
right.
Um, so all right, so pretty much you said so it looks like from 1 million to 5 million is the range where long-term care is going to really make sense.
Exactly.
Okay. So yeah,
Million and under. In other words, if you only have $500,000, you know what I'm saying? Anything under 1 million, you for sure are probably going to end up in Medicaid, unless, of course, you're living with children.
yeah, I mean presumably under 1 million to be in Medicaid, but I mean you wouldn't at some level it'd be hard to afford long-term care payments. So if you're looking at long-term care, is it better to do like a single premium pay, or are you looking at like annual payments, or what do you find is the
I
best?
I do annual. I just do annual. But I mean, look, $10,000 is a lot of money or $8,000. It really depends on which one that you're purchasing. For instance, what I basically purchased was a pot of money. And I purchased it, 15 years ago. And I have an inflation rider on it. So I can last with the money I have probably 4 or 5 years in long-term care. So, I mean, in an assisted living center, in a nice assisted living center. And if I should have Alzheimer's or any kind of dementia, the same would work for um, a memory care unit.
So let me ask you this. How would somebody, is this just kind of a glorified savings account, or how would somebody kind of arbitrage this to their benefit? Because if you're paying 10,000 a year and eventually you're going to have access to, I don't know, we'll call it 500,000. I don't know what the amount would be, but
It'll be more than that, around 700.
okay. So so 10,000 a year, you're getting about 700,000 in benefit. Um, so obviously
After about
there's,
15 years. I mean, remember,
yeah, right. Well, so that raises the other question. What if long-term care runs out? Like, what if you run out of that? Do you just get stuck in the system
Medicaid,
again?
Medicaid.
Okay. So you're ultimately going to end up there. It's just a question of how long you can stretch it.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good to know. Um, now, you mentioned inflation. Now, we talk about inflation a lot in the show, and one of the challenges I see with inflation is the calculations are completely off. So, you have you have healthcare, which is going up at double-digit inflation rates, but the CPI is like two or
I
three.
know. I know.
So, I assume this is based on the CPI. So, is it really even helping having an inflation rider? I know
Yes,
it's not hurting, but it's not
right.
really solving the problem.
Look, I had a 5% inflation rider, and then when my premium went up, I went down to 3%. I'd had it for about 12 or 13 years. So I went down to 3% just to keep the premium low, but I'm not going to go below 3%. If I have to take my premium higher, it'll have to go higher. But the way it helps is it keeps up. I mean, I have more money because of that inflation
So are
rider.
you, so are you, so you're paying more each year for the premiums?
Nope, I pay 3%. The premium is the number that includes a 3% inflation rate.
Okay, so your premiums, so if you have long-term care for like 20 years, you're not paying more each year, you're paying the same amount for 20
I'm
years.
paying the same amount.
Okay, all right, I just wanted to make sure. Um, so that also raises the question of, when's the best time to start looking at long-term care? Like, like, do you start when you're 20s? Do you start when you're 50? Like, what's a good time to do it? And so it becomes more, I guess, economical.
Well, it's so funny. I was just talking to my stepdaughter. She asked me the same question. Um, I would say between 55 and 60
Okay.
to keep it economical. But you're not going to be using it at that point. For the most part, the majority of people are not going to be using their long-term care until they're in their 80s. Almost all my clients with long-term care are in their 80s. And I also tell them when you get sick, when you get sick, start the claim because almost all of these have a 90-day exemption where you're going to have to pay for it for the first 90 days. So start the claim like if you have a broken leg, right? And you're going to need someone, start the claim then and there. Normally, I'll just use my long-term care insurance. My long-term care insurance, I start the claim. So here's what happens. I don't have to pay the premium because I'm on claim. And I have to pay whoever the person is that's helping me. That's coming out of my pocket. All right. So after a month, let's say I'm well enough, I'm getting around, I don't need the help. I stop the claim. I have to go back to paying my premium, but I am no longer paying this person. But I have used 30 days of that 90-day exemption. So it's now a 60-day exemption because by the time you're 80, if you get really sick, if you have I don't know, pneumonia like the Pope has right now and he's in the hospital, but you're at home, right? Okay. And at 80, now you don't have the income coming in that you did, when you were 65. I mean, I have Medicare, but I still work. So at 65, I can, I'm still having an income. At 85, I'll probably have an income, but it's going to be coming out of my IRAs or, you know what I'm saying? And as a consequence, it's all my savings, but I'm not going to have to spend 90 days um, paying my own health care. Depending on what's happened before, I'll only have to spend 60. So I always tell people open the claim the minute you need it. Everyone seems to be afraid, oh no, I don't really need long-term care. Whether you need it or not, it's there. Why don't you use it? It's a little like disability insurance.
Yeah, no, so you're saying that you could put in claims earlier and you're just reducing the window even though if you're not going to go on long
Right.
term if you get sick for a few weeks or something, you just keep putting in the
Or if you're
claims,
in
it
a
keeps
car,
reducing it.
if you're in a car accident, especially someone like me who lives alone, no one's going to come and help me out. So I'm going to have to pay someone to come and help me out.
Yeah, and that obviously raises a lot of questions too. So, all right. So basically you're talking about most people won't need it until their 80s. What happens if you're in the system and you run out of money? You're in assisted living or in some facility and you run out of money. Do they kick you out or what do they do?
They're not allowed to kick you out. They have to find a Medicaid bed.
So they just put you in a different room that's less, luxurious? Like, what do
Uh,
you mean they find a Medicaid bed?
well, I mean, every assisted living facility is supposed to have a Medicaid bed in other words, they cannot kick you out without finding you a place to live, period. And so you can still live there, but then they're going to sooner or later move you into Medicaid. It's part of the licensing. Or let me say this, it's part of the licensing here in Florida, and it's part of the licensing in Georgia, where my father was.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I just asking for reference. Okay, so they still keep you there, but I would imagine people
They'll
who
move you. I mean, they'll move you into a Medicaid facility as soon as they can.
oh, so you're not in the same facility. They'll move you to another facility.
Exactly.
Oh, okay. Because I was in the impression that they couldn't, like, when you run out of money, they can't boot you, so they make
Well, they
sure that
can't
you're
boot you immediately. In other words,
okay.
they're going to try and find a place um, for you because they don't, they're a profit-making organization. Sometimes, you have to fight a little bit for it, but they have to have some Medicaid beds.
It seems to me is that the incentive is for these institutions um not to keep you healthy, but to just keep you alive so they can keep getting paid. Um,
I have a
the,
client who's Venezuelan, and as a consequence, she cannot have Medicaid. She pays $12,000 a month to be in a fetal position, asleep most of the time, and her little fingers and hands are like little bones with skin around them. $12,000 a month. Because, and here, this is the other thing that drives me nuts, we're not allowed to kill ourselves. In other words, today, Kirk, you and I both are of sound mind and sound body. I don't know about you, but I know I do not want to be in some Medicaid facility in a fetal position, uh, being fed. I mean, her, at this point, she doesn't need to be fed by a tube, but more and more it's getting harder for her to eat, and they have to feed her. And she barely, I mean, she's not alive. There is no quality of life there, but I'm not allowed to say now, I signed this directive that if I'm that way, please just give me too much morphine, too many pills, whatever. Just take me out of the misery and give the bed to someone else. And they don't do it for, we can talk about the morality of it all we want, but I see it every day. These people laying in beds with their tongues hanging out, slobbering, and they don't want to be there. I would not want anyone to see me that way. And
yeah,
yet we can't kill ourselves.
yeah. I mean, that's a whole nother conversation. We're gonna get people riled up. You start talking about that. Um, yeah. Well, withstanding that, I'm just thinking about it from the standpoint of what's where are the incentives aligned, right? So if they can't kick you out of a facility, then their incentive is not to give you the best care so that you go downhill faster. If they have to keep you there, so and if they do have to keep you there, or they can, then certainly they're going to milk it as much as they can. So I, I'm not saying they're good or bad people. I'm just saying it seems very interesting that when people are the most vulnerable in their lives that they have to deal with this. And people who have families to take care of them that are fortunate enough for their families to take care of them, which I want to get to as well. Um, that's great. But if you don't, like the system eats you alive. It just seems like a challenging thing. So let's talk about those two different scenarios. So if somebody has no one
Uh-huh.
to care for them, what are the best ways to plan for that?
The best ways to plan for that is A, to have long-term care, B, to save for it. In other words, usually, for instance, the house you live in, you can sell the house and take the money from the sale of the house. I mean, that's usually most people's asset, the largest asset. Um, an IRA, a 401k. I mean, and even if you do have children, those are all things you want to do. Um, but I mean, that's it. And you have to, have a power of attorney so that someone can make financial decisions for you. You have to have a healthcare proxy so someone can make those decisions for you. And either a trust, a will, or you title um, different instruments that you have in ways that they go through, they pass, they don't go through probate. That's what I would say if you're living for yourself. That's what I have done. I actually have a trust where I have my accounts and my home.
So, okay, so that's if you have no one. What if you have kids or other people that can take care of you?
Well, the first question is, will they?
Good question. Yep.
I have chosen not to be that person. In other words, my husband is in a facility. I'm not going to take care of him at home. What we forget about taking care of someone at home is that oftentimes, especially with dementia, there are issues with toileting, there are issues with eating, there are issues with, doesn't matter what direction you give them, they're going to forget it in a minute. But I also have a very good friend who is never leaving her husband, no matter what. He has Parkinson's, has had it for probably 12 or 11, 12 or 13 years. And she takes care of him totally, but they've run out of money and have to sell their home. And now we're looking at options as to what to do next. And of course, I've been helping them. And in this case, it's been pro bono because they really are out of money. They just have Social Security.
So, um, but it brings up, you mentioned they're selling their home. Uh, have you seen people use reverse mortgages? Do you find those to be good vehicles or not? I know there's always some weirdness around those, so I'm just curious in your opinion.
Well, I mean, I know a lot of people who have reverse mortgages because they didn't want to pay whatever their mortgage was. But I think if you have to have a reverse mortgage, it's a great tool. But it's a very, very expensive tool. There's a lot of fees associated with it. I'm not a reverse mortgage fan. I think it's better to downsize um, and have a real mortgage where you can just pay it off when you sell the house versus having to pay the taxes, the condo fees, the yard maintenance. I mean, having a reverse mortgage is a little bit like having a life tenancy in a home because you have to keep it up for the next person.
Yeah, I think the challenge is, as I think about it, it depends on the situation, of course, but if you've got a home and I guess I think about it as arbitrage. Like if I think that I'm going to live to 150 and the actuarial tables have me living to 76, then I'm going to find ways to arbitrage that, right? And because, you can get reverse mortgage for the next 50 years and they think I'm going to live 10, well, hell, why not? That would be in my favor, right?
Right.
Um, so I guess I kind of think of things that way, and conversations I have with people are really based around like, I don't know, what do you think of your health? Because I know
Mhm.
we can't know for sure, but certainly if there's some arbitrage, and that's I guess long-term care seems like it's harder to do that because you just have a pot of money that you run out of at some point.
Right.
Um, life insurance is one of those things that if you're going to die quick, then it's a good arbitrage opportunity. If you're going to live a long time, maybe not.
Well,
So
after 70, it goes up to 30 or $40,000 a year.
yeah.
I mean, life insurance is only good, in my opinion, up until you're 70. After 70, it's like, okay, kids, you're on your own.
Well, you don't need it at that point. Like, who are you trying to insure
That's how
against?
I feel. Yeah, you
Yeah,
don't need it. I don't have life insurance.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's basically to cover when you're young, to cover the kids through college and the mortgage and all that stuff. And past that, it's just, hey, I want to leave you some money. That's really all it is. Yeah, it's
Exactly.
not needed, but um, okay. So, all right. So we talked about if no, you have no one, if you have people to care for you. Um, what should people be thinking about if they're thinking, well, I want to care for my parents? Because obviously, you said parent your parents. I'm experiencing this now. I experienced it a bunch of years ago with my dad, and certainly my father-in-law now is getting up there, and he's still perfectly capable of taking care of himself. But you get to that age where it starts to become oh, what are we going to do now? how are we going to deal with this? I've got kids now. Now I'm inheriting another kid, you know? Like it's like I
It's
didn't
still.
it's like we didn't get pregnant for that third kid, but we're getting them. And so it makes me kind of think through like how should people be thinking about that with their parents? And you mentioned whether you want to care for somebody or not, but sometimes you don't have an issue, you don't have a choice, but what should people be thinking about? Because there's certainly an obligation there too. Like, hey, these are my parents. We're obligated. Like, we're
Listen,
just going to
for
do
me,
it.
it was an honor. I'm going to tell you something. Now, in the case of mom and dad, they had long-term care. They had a certain amount of long-term care. Mother outlived her long-term care, so she went into a nursing home. My father did not. He died prior to outliving his long-term care. And in both cases, mom had dementia, dad did not. In both ca and dad actually lived with my brother for about a year. And then he decided it was just time for him to go to an assisted living where, because in an assisted living home, you have other people your own age. Like all the vets would go out to lunch together or, they'd go to a movie together. You know what I'm saying? So there was a little bit more society, which I think is so important. Um, uh, but if you're taking care of a mom or a dad in your own home, it's not it's not going to be easy, especially if you have your own kids. If there's a mother-in-law suite, a place where they can live. I also have a couple of clients who have a place where their parent lives outside of the home. They have their own kitchen, and then they visit, they'll come, that sort of thing. That works well. But when someone is in your space and children and parents, the parents aren't necessarily, certainly my father wasn't necessarily crazy about me making decisions for him simply because I thought he was too old to make the decisions. On the other hand, the decisions I made for them saved them A, a lot of money, and B, allowed them to have a good life until the day they died, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I mean, this is I've started to see this come up a lot with a lot of my friends who are not necessarily caring for elderly parents yet, but
Mhm.
getting to that point where it starts to happen. And a lot of the conversations we've been having are how do you handle the transition from the parent being capable till, well, they're not really making the best decisions for themselves. And, like
Or
my dad
paying their
was
bills, paying their bills.
paying their bills, but just, I mean, here's an example. So you're going to try to talk to an elderly person, tell them you shouldn't be driving anymore because they're a danger to themselves and other people. They're
Uh-huh.
not going to say, okay, sure, I'm just going to go sit in my house. They're going to be like, no, I'm doing whatever I want. I'm perfectly fine. And my dad was like this. He would drive around, he'd bump into things and was like, well, I mean, he's never going to listen to us. So I hope he doesn't get hurt, but like, there's nothing I can say to stop him. So
Mhm.
you start having all these conversations that are very challenging because you some things you have agency to control and some things you don't. And so what are some good tips to help people navigate those conversations that are going to be becoming increasingly frequent because of the aging and aging out of their capabilities?
Yeah. Well, my father took away my mother's keys and she never forgave him, ever. He
Yeah.
kept talking about it. Um, we were pretty lucky with dad. He had leased a car, and when the lease was up, he said, I don't really think I need another car. So, phew, dodged a bullet. But I have several clients who have this issue with their parents. And it's not even, they're not so nervous about them um, bumping into someone, but getting lost. You know, there you are, like 30 miles, and this has happened. You know, you get on 95 North thinking you're going to 95 South and end up in Boca Raton, not in Kendall, because you just went the wrong way because you didn't really understand the difference between North and South. I mean, or notice that it was 95 South or 95 North. Um, and taking the keys away, what I have done several times is bring in a therapist. Let someone else be or me, let someone else be the bad person. If they have an accident, then you have an excuse. If they're just getting lost, it's harder.
But it's not just about trying to prove to them that you're correct. The
Mhm.
challenge is you're taking away their independence. So
Exactly.
I think of human beings as like a bell curve of maturity. So like babies have no maturity, and as they grow up, they get more maturity up to like a peak, and then they start to lose it. It's like when you have elder parents, it's like having babies again. Like you can't let them do things that you can't let your kids do. Only difference is the older parents, they know better, So but
Yeah.
like, they have issues with like eating and toileting and all this stuff. It's just like I just think of it, it's just like so funny to think about, but yet, like babies don't know better, and you can just lie to them because it's for their own good. But parents, you got to fight them because they don't want to lose their independence.
And what, I mean, the good news is now we have Uber and Lyft.
Yeah.
So, you put you put that on their phone, whether it's to your credit card or to their credit card, just depending. And you said you just press this button and tell them where to go. I mean, I mean, talk about setting them free. Or what I did with my dad, who was like, Uber was very new as my dad was nearing his death. I was probably 2 years old. I would say, Dad, I mean, I'd be here in Miami, he'd be up in Atlanta. I'd say, Dad, let me call you an Uber. And I would, just get on Uber and have someone pick him up there and take him there. I did the same thing with my husband because there came a point where um, Tom really could no longer drive. Now, the Tom, because I think because of the Alzheimer's, but I don't know this. I'm a lawyer, not a doctor. He he didn't want to drive. He didn't want to have the processing was a little hard for him, you know? So I mean, not that he wouldn't sit in the seat next to me and tell me how to drive, but what I would do sometimes is just take him. This is when I was caring for him at home. I would take him to wherever it was he wanted to go. Then I'd say, call me and I'll have Uber come pick you up. I mean, so we have, you know, um, more options on how to take away the keys today. But one way or the other, look, it doesn't matter when it comes to your parents. If mom and dad lived in Houston and they had to decide whether they were going to live in Miami or Atlanta, because I'm in Miami and my brother was in Atlanta. And dad chose Atlanta, but he didn't want that. He wanted to die in his home. He wanted to die right there in Houston. And I just said, Dad, you can't take care of mom anymore. And, and my father wasn't happy with me. Who are you, young lady, to tell me what I can and can't do? I mean, and guess what? That's going to happen. Whoever that child is, that is the caretaker, it's not going to be easy. I have a dear, dear friend whose husband has Parkinson's and mom is 93. Now, the husband, you know, his stuff is more physical, but mom is kind of losing it. And she is always getting mad at her daughter. Don't tell me what to do, little missy. I mean, what do you want me to do? And you feel, I have to say, having been through that, you feel like, what else can I do? I'm paying your bills. I mean, how about a thank you? But you know what? They're not going to thank you. Now, in truth, I'm wrong. My father thanked me every time he saw me. He would just thank me for everything I was doing. But that is the exception, not the rule.
Yeah, I agree. I don't hear a lot of stories of people thanking their kids for that.
No,
One
mom
one question
never thanked me.
one question that comes up a lot is I've seen this a lot with my elder clients over the years is I don't have, as an advisor, I have no control over, you know, protecting them, right? Because I'm not part of their family. I can advise them and educate them on stuff, but I can't actually do much.
Right.
So what I've seen over time is as people age, they get more easily taken advantage of. Um, so, people in the financial industry, scammers. I mean, I had clients,
Family,
yeah, family too, yeah. But so how do people?
lawyers.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. Like everyone can take advantage of them because they're not equipped to protect themselves like they were.
Right.
What's the best strategy for both them and for people who are looking out for them?
Well, first of all, you want to double check on undue influence, right? You definitely want to double check on undue influence because there's always going to be one kid, not always. The majority of times, there's going to be one kid who does very little but thinks they deserve everything everybody else is getting. Now, that's where your financial planner comes in to being, right? Now, where is this money going? You have to have, and every financial planner or lawyer or anybody who's taking care of somebody, you have to have a power of attorney because, and not that the power of attorney, it's a dangerous instrument. That power of attorney can also take, um, uh, scam. I mean, because once you have the power of attorney, you can go to the bank. I can tell you right now, a woman that had 40,000, her daughter made herself power of attorney. It was a huge, blew up in everybody's faces, including the facility where she was staying. But all that being said, it blew up in everybody's faces. And very soon now, this person is going to run out of money. She's not going to have any money whatsoever. At which point, the daughter, who is the power of attorney, I have no idea what she's going to do because the daughter doesn't have any money. So if if you as a lawyer, if you as a financial planner, if you suspect something, say something.
Yeah, yeah, it's hard. I've actually in my state, I had a client maybe 10, 15 years ago, friend of the family, been working with him for a while, and some other insurance guy came in and was basically trying to commission bomb him, doing things that were not the right thing for him, let's just say. And and I tried to protect him and I talked to him about it, and I had other people talk to him and everyone's like, even his family, I talked to his family, his kids, and they're just like, he's going to do what he's going to do. Like
Mhm.
he's not going to listen to you. And I even talked to the state. I asked the state to intervene because this was like borderline criminal, like what the guy was
Mhm.
suggesting. And so I intervened with the state, and the state's like, well, there's nothing we can do about it. Like
Oh,
literally, they're just like, there's nothing we can do about it. I was like, are you serious? Like you have a whole line for this? You're like, no, not unless somebody's harmed, and like afterwards they can do it, but not before. I was like, so what good are you?
exactly.
They're like,
And
call the
then
state police, and I call the state police. They're like, yeah, we can't do anything either. I'm just like,
oh,
Jesus, like,
I have tried to get, I went so far as to interview the investigators from the Miami Police Department to tell them what was going on. And they said, well, he has dementia. Or, I mean, does he really remember what happened? Well, no, but we can show you what happened. We can show you where the money went. Here's this document. Here's where this person said they were family and they aren't family. But, economic crimes, for whatever reason, states' attorneys, they talk about it, but do nothing about it. I've had one client whose home has been taken away. He can't read. He can't read. Yet they had him sign the deed, and now we're trying to get the house back. But just getting the attention of the state attorney is really hard because everybody wants their attention. It's,
Well, you also live in the fraud capital of the United States, down in
I,
Miami.
d-
So
I
they're a
know,
little busy.
I know. We invented Medicare fraud.
Yeah, I know. Medicare fraud is crazy down there. Like I
I
can't
know.
imagine. And it just I can't imagine why I don't even know. Like why is Miami like the central hub of this when no other part of the country is? I don't understand it. Like what's going
And
on down there?
and as attorney, I can tell you, we have such a tough bar. I mean, our bar is so tough on us and they publicize everything that I call, like, for instance, I forgot when I put Parent Your Parents LLC or H. Francis R. Esquire LLC. It's supposed to be PLLC because I'm a professional. I'm telling you, I called the Florida bar. Oh my gosh, I have to self-report. And they laughed at me. Well, no, you don't have to self-report that. We can just put the P in there for you. And, but
Yeah.
yet, not only is it the lawyers, remember all the pill mills we had? The doctors, and these doctors are from, Uruguay. I mean, they got their degree not in the USA. Some, of course, some did. And the doctors who allow this Medicare fraud to go on. I mean, we had one doctor whose manager, her office manager, was the one who committed the Medicare fraud and she knew nothing about it. And I thought to myself, that's an excuse? I,
Yeah.
and here we are. But you're right, no. And the other thing we do down here is we sell personal injury cases. In other words, if you think you've got $1 million case, you people can invest in that.
Yes. Yeah, there's that's a new investment category. I mean, that's a different podcast, but but yeah, you can invest in legal cases. It's actually a pretty lucrative thing to do if you know what you're doing. The problem is most people don't. And I mean, if I was an attorney and I knew the system and the cases really well, that's what I would invest in. Like I know I mean, there's a bit of variability. You don't know how it's going to go, but you can sift through things pretty well and know like, all right, there's a X amount of chance, and you could run numbers and do enough of them. But it can be very lucrative. You're just betting on the outcome. So it's very interesting. Well, Francis, I appreciate you coming to the show. I know we got to wrap up here in the interest of time, but yeah, I appreciate you sharing your wisdom with us. I know things are changing. I'm sure with the new administration, things will change even more to keep us on our toes. But yeah, final thoughts you can leave us with, and where can people find more about you?
Well, the final thought is that it's going right back to the commandments, right? Honor your father and your mother, honor yourself, honor those around you. And anybody listening to this podcast is either going to grow old or die before they grow old. It's that simple. And so when you see an elder, just remember you too will be there one day or not. And the other thing I'm going to remind everybody of, no one likes to hear this, is everybody dies. Queen Elizabeth died. If Queen Elizabeth dies,
Eventually, eventually she died.
yeah, yeah, she was
Took a
in her
while.
90s, but it didn't matter. I mean, the bottom line is, so so plan your life so that you can live it to the fullest. And that usually means an estate plan. and read my book so you'll know how to have fun after you have your estate plan in place. And that again is Boomers Booming, How to Thrive After 65. And you can find it on my website, parentyourparents.com, or on Amazon. And Kirk, thank you so, so much for having me on. It's really been, it's really made me think of some of the things I hadn't thought of. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah, yeah, I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your wisdom with us. Love talking about long-term care and parenting. So thank you again. I will have you back on the future. You've been a fountain of wisdom and much appreciated.
Thank you.
Hey, Doug, did you hear? We're giving away free money. Well, I'll tell you about it in a minute, but before I do, there's a saying in the mining community, well, precious metals mining, that is. The saying is that if you want the best deals, you have to be in the room. Now, you're probably thinking, what does it mean to be in the room? Well, I'll tell you. Being in the room means that you're on the short list of people who get invited to be a part of the best deals. These are the deals that most investors will never have access to. I mean, like IPOs? Nope, IPOs are chump change. Those are for retail investors, small potatoes. That's nothing compared to these deals. These deals would have you salivating to get access to them. Once you know they exist, you will never look at investing the same way again. I almost don't want to even tell you that they exist because it will ruin your thinking of how the investing world really works. Now, you might be excited that these deals exist, but you only have access to the deals if you're an insider or in the room, as they call it. Now, as loyal listeners to the show, I'm going to give you a chance to be in the room. Money Tree Investing Podcast has created the Insiders Club. This is a community of our show's members who are loyal listeners of the show and want to get more out of their investing experience. Being a part of the Insiders Club gives you insider status for upcoming events and webinars, discounts, free stuff and books, and influence on the future direction of the show. This is a great opportunity to join us as we expand our content and services. Oh, and did I mention free money? Yes, in the next few weeks, I'll be giving away free money to our members of the Insiders Club as my appreciation for listening to the show. Now, there's no cost to join the Insiders Club. Just go to moneytreepodcast.com/free money today to join the community. That's www.moneytreepodcast.com/free money. I hope to see you in the room. All right. Well, that was a great interview with Frances. Really appreciate coming on the show. Now we're into the panel portion of the show where we have our very own Barb Friedberg. Hey, Barb.
Hi, how are you doing today?
Doing great. Doing great. And we have our very own Phil Weiss. Hey, Phil.
Hey, how are you doing today? Good to be here.
Awesome. Well, glad to have you as well. So Barb, what did you think of Frances? What were some of your takeaways from the interview?
Well, she's very smart, and these are issues that we all have to deal with, albeit they are very gloomy. So I that age 85 number kind of hit me hard when she said, "Yeah, most people you hit 85 and then, pretty much it's downhill from there."
Well, it's pretty good if you're going uphill your whole life and you only go downhill at 85, Barb. That's not too
Yeah,
bad.
but not to but when you get 85, you might think differently about it.
That's true. That's true. Yeah. Health span is more important than lifespan, I suppose. Phil, what about you? What are some of your takeaways?
I like that comment. Health span is more important than lifespan. And maybe we get lucky and we're one of those that you said go into the 90s before they start going downhill. But I mean, the bottom line is this is a really important topic to consider. I know it's something that I want to make sure I talk about with my clients because I deal with a lot of female clients. And in that situation, think about the fact that the husband's usually older than his wife and that women live longer than men. So she's most likely the one that's going to be put in this situation because if something happens to her husband and he needs that in-home care, she may be able to help with that. And if he's gone and it's hurt and then she needs it, there's not anybody there. So that makes it even more relevant for for women, I think, than men, this issue.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's definitely, I mean, yeah, I mean, I think women, when you live longer, obviously the numbers change. And, I know we talked a lot about long-term care and love to get your thoughts on it, Barb, but Insurance is kind of a sticky beast, and you really have to have a good sense of what you're trying to accomplish. Um, because insurance is sold, not bought, I think is the term. But sometimes it can be in your benefit if you do the math right. So, Barb, what were some of your thoughts about like long-term care? And I don't know if you've put much study into this over your career.
Well, I really liked her benchmark of saying if you have under 5 million, you probably should look into it. And if you have over 10 million, well, then maybe you don't have it. So that gives us kind of a range. I don't know because the problem with long-term care insurance is it's expensive. And every year you have it, it goes up and up and up. And you have to pay the premium every year. Um, but if you look at it in aggregate, so maybe over your lifetime, you'll spend $100,000 on long-term care insurance. But if you consider if you're in nursing home care for a couple of years, that could be a lot more expensive. So it's a risk reward. And I think there are no easy answers with long-term care.
Yeah, no, I agree. Phil, what about you? What are your thoughts? I know you deal with this stuff on a regular basis.
It is something that there's no easy answers for. And one of the hardest things is we start with one premium and there's inflate your premiums get adjusted for inflation. And I have had several times where people that I work with that have long-term care insurance to say, it went up by this much. Should I keep paying that inflation premium? Because it just gets more and more expensive over time. So that's something else. You can't say, well, it's not like if I get a term life insurance policy and my premium is set for the duration of my policy. When you have long-term care, your premiums can change every year. So it's not just figuring out what you're going to pay that year that you start the policy. It's the fact that it can increase over time. And part of that's because healthcare costs increase over time. I understand that, but it gets hard because those premiums, if you're on fixed income, they can get harder and harder to manage. So there are times that clients will say, I'm not going to pay that inflated premium anymore, and I'm just going to cut my benefit and cap it at whatever that level may be because of that. But it is something important. I like the idea of having those guidelines around when you might need it and when you don't. It's something that I think a lot of people, when you work with people on their financial plan, you say, what would you like it to be at end of life? And I'm like, I want it to stay in my house. Well, it's not as simple as that because it depends on what happens to you. And then even if you do, you have to think about the fact that you might have to make changes to your house. If your house has more than one floor and you can't go up steps anymore, what are you going to do? Either you're going to have a chairlift to get you up and down, or you're going to have to make sure that you can live on that one floor. I know I had an aunt and uncle, and when they moved out of their home and they moved into a 55 and older community, they had it adapted so that the first floor had everything that they needed. And when their family came and visited them, they went to the second floor. So there's things like that that you have to consider too. It goes beyond just long-term care insurance when you're thinking about those plans for when you get older.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I've followed long-term care over the years of my career, and I always found it to be very confusing. I found that very few advisors understand it or how to apply it properly. There's a handful that specialize in it, but most don't. But like you said, Phil, I think that the hardest thing is figuring out what you're going to need. I mean, if I'm thinking about retirement now and I'm like half a century old, I've got some time, but when do you start? Like, when do you start thinking about it? Like, what's the appropriate time to start paying for it if you are going to pay for it? What are the needs going to be? Is it going to be enough? I mean, I know in Massachusetts, I feel like every year an insurance company leaves. So I know for like the last, I think, 10 years, like every year or two, a guy I know that specializes, he calls me, he's like, oh, by the way, another insurance company left. I'm like, how many are there left in the state? I don't know, two or three? Like everyone's leaving. Well, why are they leaving? Well, it's probably because the state's making it too onerous for them to stay. Plus, it's not all that profitable to begin with of a line of business. Um, the funny thing about insurance companies is they're really good at cutting the services I don't want to say to the bone, but like if you look at term policies, they are dirt cheap. They're commodities, and you can get a really, as long as you're reasonably healthy, you can get a really cheap policy. But once you start getting to the crazy stuff, like the whole life and the permanent and all this stuff, universal, things tend to get a little bit more expensive. And you're buying something else. You're not just buying insurance, you're buying something else on top of it. But if you can get a really a clean policy that is just covering what you need, you can get relatively cheap. The challenge with, as Phil said, is how do you know what you're going to need? Like, I want to live in my home too when I get older. I don't know. I mean, I don't want to leave. But I think it's hard to speculate when you're younger because you don't know what you're going to want. And I don't want to spend a month trolling around nursing homes and assisted living facilities to figure out what I want to be doing when I'm 50. Probably I'll do that when it gets closer, but then it might be too late to plan. So I think all this stuff is really aging is challenging because you don't know what you're going to get. Was Forrest Gump say it's like a box of chocolates. You don't know what you're going to get. So I don't know. It's interesting. But Barb, what are some other things people should be thinking about as they're aging?
Well, you obviously want to do the basics. Like you need a will, you need a probably a trust, you need a power of attorney, you need a medical power of attorney, all those sort of things you really want to get in place because it's better to do it sooner than later. Then you can adjust them as you get older. Because the future is unknowable, and you want to think about what's going to be easiest for the people that are left behind for me. So a lot of us put those type of decisions off, but I'd say make it a priority, get it done, and then you've got the documents in place when something unforeseen does occur.
Okay, great. Phil, what about you? What are other things people should be thinking about?
Well, one thing that I don't think you talked about with Francis was if you're self-employed, the game changes a little bit because your premiums, at least some of them, because there is a cap that's put on it, but they can be tax deductible. So it can be more tax tax effective or cost effective to get long-term care insurance if you're self-employed because you get that deduction. That's just going to serve to reduce the cost. Yes, they could become an itemized deduction potentially if you're filing your on Schedule A, but there's a 7.5% cap on how much you can deduct. You have to be over that, and then you have to exceed the standard deduction. So you might not get it, but if you're self-employed, that is one benefit that you get with having long-term care insurance. So that is something to keep in mind. Uh, Beyond that, I think like Francis said, like in your 50s, from what I've talked to people about with long-term care insurance, that seems to be the right age. I know I talked to a potential new client this week, and she was 46. And she said she was thinking about it, but she had all these other things. And in that case, I said, you just told me you have like four really important things to you. Let's wait on long-term care insurance because you're still a little bit young. And to start incurring that expense now doesn't make sense. But she was single. And so that is, like I said, when you're single and there's not somebody else, you don't know that you have somebody else that can take care of you. She does have a son, but honestly, sons are less likely to take care of their mothers than daughters are. Like that's just how it typically works. So it makes sense for her to think about it. But in that case, I thought it was just too soon.
Yeah, and here's another interesting topic. I mean, you mentioned caregiving of children. I think one of the other challenges with children is, like you said, daughters are more likely to care for their parents than sons are. Um, but and some people don't have anyone to care for. But here's the other thing. Should you be caring for your parents? Because one of the challenges, and it's not a family or a love thing. It's when you're a caregiver, you're giving up your life for that other person. A lot of people I know that are caregivers, like their life turns to crap, like their personal life, because they don't spend time in themselves, they're spending it all on the other person, which is maybe a choice you decide to make, but I think the challenge is most people don't realize that it's a choice that they're making, and that most people feel obligated to do it, which is fine. But I think the question is not whether you should do it. The question is whether you should be the one doing it or whether you should be outsourcing it to somebody else. Like have somebody there every day or whatever it is. Find ways to do it so you don't have to take all the burden. Because I've seen this a bunch of times throughout my career where people take on that burden and like their life turns to a mess. And it's like you need to um what's the phrase? You need to take care of yourself before you can take care of somebody else. And so most people don't take care of themselves. They let themselves go. They don't exercise. They don't eat well. They're not taking care of themselves. And then that's to both people's detriment. So I don't know if you have thoughts on this, Barb, but like, what are your, like, how do you look at this part? Like, do you have thoughts, or are you just kind of still at the stage where you're like, I don't even know what I want, or not to say you're that close, but it's, as we all age, we all have thoughts about where we want, and maybe, some people just haven't thought about it yet. I don't know.
Part of that is a cultural thing. I happen to live in a community which has, it's very, very diverse. People from many, many different countries of origin. And in some cultures, it is expected that you will take care of your parents. In the US culture, we don't really have that expectation as much. I grew up with the idea in my family, my grandmother was like, "You're not taking care of me." To my mom, "I'm going into a facility." She went into a facility. It was fine. We were fortunate with her. She died at night without getting really sick. I mean, that's the biggest blessing you could have when you're elderly. My mom was fine until she wasn't. She had a stroke. Then she went into a facility because there was no other choice. My dad, too, went into a facility when he had Alzheimer's, and my mother couldn't take care of him. I mean, she didn't have the ability or the skill, and I guess opted, not to pay the money to have someone come in. So, my personal thoughts are, first of all, going into a facility, some people are like, "Oh, I never want to do that. It's horrible, whatever." I mean, it's not the worst thing in the world, and sometimes having the other people around and the activities can be not a bad thing when you're getting older. Most people say, "Oh, I'd rather have someone come in and care for me." At some point, that can get very, very, very expensive. So, personally, I think just be open to whatever comes your way. I kind of like Phil have thoughts of, oh, if our house happens to have a lot of stairs, and I have in mind that, well, at some point, if stairs become difficult, we could move downstairs, turn the den into a bedroom. That's what my father-in-law did, and that way you alleviate having to go upstairs. So, yeah, I think in the back of my mind, I have ideas that, would enable staying in the house, but my personal belief is be flexible. Think what's going to be best for your family. I would never want my daughter to take care of me, not in a million years. I wouldn't want to do that to her. She's got her own life, she's got her own issues. That's just that's just not my way of thinking.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Barb. What about you, Phil? You put thoughts into this?
Yeah, so one other thing that I'd like to bring up too, you mentioned like if somebody in the family takes care of you, it goes beyond the impact directly on their life because they're not taking care of themselves and they're not spending time on themselves. There's also the fact that if you think about, they're losing income while they're doing that, right? Because oftentimes nobody's paying them for that. So they don't have that income. And if they don't have that income, that means that they're not paying into Social Security. They're not saving for retirement. Yes, if they're married, they might be able to get a spousal benefit on their IRA or something like that. But really, their earnings and their savings are not happening. So it has a double effect because of that. So that's something else that you have to keep in mind as well. When I think about this, like Barb said, I don't really want my children to take care of me either because they have their lives and I want them to be able to live their lives. When I talk to clients about this, a lot of times recommend is that they consider continuing care retirement communities where if they're in good shape, they can go in, yes, they're going to pay a monthly fee and they're going to get care, but it can work out pretty well because if you get in there when you're okay, you can also have a plan for what happens to you as you age and as you need more care. I know I have a grandmother who, when my grandfather died, so I'm doing quick math, she was 84 and she lived to 102. And that was when my grandfather died. And she moved back. They were living in Florida at the time. They moved back to Virginia. They moved into a continuing care retirement community. She had people, like it was where she was originally from in Virginia. So there were people that she knew. She would play cards. When she first got there, she had a car. She could go do her own thing. And then the last year or two of her life, she needed more care and she was able to move within that community and they were able to, within that facility, and they were able to take care of her. So I think that that's also an option for people to consider is at some point, like if I have a widow that I work with and she's in her 80s and she became widowed a year and a half ago. And at some point, like that's what she's been looking at, looking for the right community. She's still in good shape. She doesn't want her kids to take care of her. She doesn't want to worry about things going wrong in the house. Like she could afford to stay there now. It wasn't originally that way, but something changed. They brought some money to her. Somebody passed away and she inherited some money. She could stay, but it doesn't make, we both have talked about it and she doesn't think it makes sense because if she moves into a continuing care community, she doesn't have to worry about being taken care of if something happens to her when she's older, because now like her spouse isn't there, she's alone, and it's not something a burden she wants to put on her kids. So that's something else to think about too, is the CCRTs or continuing care retirement communities.
Nice. Awesome. Well, as we kind of wrap it up here, Barb, final thoughts from you, any areas we missed, and where can people find more about you?
I think it all gets down to planning. Don't avoid thinking about this topic because, I mean, probably you can avoid, you should have a will at all times. That's just a given, regardless of your age. But as you get into your 50s and older, you want to have the other documents to make sure that you're covered should you get sick, should you need power of attorney healthcare directives. You also want to plan for, do you want long-term care? Don't insurance, or don't you? Do you think you'll need it? Don't you? Do you want to just risk it? Whatever. And you want to plan, have some ideas, talk to your kids, talk to your spouse about what you want to happen when you get older, because then it makes it easier to make those types of decisions. I'm Barbara Friedberg. You can find me at Barbara Friedberg Personal Finance and on YouTube. Bye.
Thanks for coming on, Barb. Phil, final thoughts from you.
I agree with what Barb said. It's really important to plan. And the other thing is when you make these documents, she's talking about a will, having healthcare directives, having power of attorney, they're not one and done. It's not like you create them. I'm in my 50s now, I'm going to create this document and I'm done. You have to make sure you update it and review it because your life circumstances could change. You could now have grandkids that weren't part of the picture. You could have divorce can happen. People can pass away. The person that you wanted to be your power of attorney or have your healthcare power of attorney, whatever that may be, that might change. Your wishes might change. And it is important too to have these family meetings and make sure that people in your family know what you want so that your wishes can be carried out. And plus, having those conversations makes it a little bit easier too. I'm Phil Weiss. My firm is Apprise Wealth Management. I know experiencing big life transitions can be stressful. My job is to help empower women facing new beginnings with the financial knowledge and tools they need to make self-assured decisions. My firm's Apprise Wealth Management. We'd love to get to know you. You can go to our website. It's Apprise Wealth, APPRISE Wealth.com to sign up for our weekly blog or to schedule a free introductory call. Thanks for having me today, Kirk.
Thanks for coming on. Thank you both. That's the show for this week. Thank you again for joining us on Money Tree Investing Podcast. My name's Kirk Chisholm, Wealth Manager of Innovative Advisor Group. We don't just manage your wealth, we make your life better. You can find more about me at innovativewealth.com. And of course, you can find me every week here on this show. You can also check out our show at Money Tree Investing Podcast. On our website, you'll have access to the show notes, resources, and the archive shows. Please remember to subscribe on our YouTube channel for immediate access to the new shows when they're released. When you subscribe to the show, it allows us to get access to some of the top minds of investing in personal finance. While you're here, please leave a comment and question if you want us to address it on the show. Have a great week ahead, and remember, no one will care about your money like you do, so invest in your life.